Folks, we will talk about the forecasting. See, forecasting is an activity that every business, undertakes. Okay, and many a times we also do the forecasting in our personal lives about the possible expenses that we have and then how much money we need to put it aside to meet those, like year-end taxes and all those things. Okay, so we do the forecasting, and business does the forecasting for many reasons. Without forecasting, they will not have a blueprint as what to do in the coming months or in the coming weeks or in the coming periods. In other words, the forecasting is done for strategic reasons, meaning that the time span that involves is in terms of years, maybe 3 to 5 years, something like that. So that could be like, for example, do we want to go global with our product and services or not? See, that is a strategic forecasting. Do we want to enter into this product range or product or in this sort of business or not? That again is strategic. That involves 3 to 5 years time span. So that's a strategic business. Okay. And then the forecasting is done for the medium term, like for anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. So this is like drawing a production schedule over the next few months as what products and services we would provide, and when we would provide. If any inventory is to be held, what would be the inventories that will keep on accumulating, maybe perhaps for a demand like the end of the year, the Christmas season. Okay, so that is a tactical time period. Again, forecasting is done. Of course, forecasting is done on a weekly basis or on a daily basis also. Like, for example, within a day, how many people should we really schedule to work in the morning shift? How many people in the afternoon shift? How many people on the night shift? So forecasting is done at various times for various length of period to meet the objective that a business has. Without forecasting, it becomes difficult for us to match our services or our production to the potential demand. So when the demand happens, we would not be prepared for it, so we have loss of business. So that again, inadequate forecasting or wrong forecasting would lead to loss of potential profits. On the other hand, if we were to forecast, and if that forecast were to be way above what the actual thing would be, we would end up with inventories of those products that would not sell. So forecasting is necessary, and accuracy of forecasting is very important for smooth running and efficiency in the system. Okay, efficiency in the system. So forecasting, in other words, is used to make plans for the future activity. Okay, so that is the forecasting, and it is done for those purposes. Okay, now when you look at the forecasting methods, there are two methods that are available. One is totally qualitative, the other one is quantitative. This might have an element of quantitative, but more or less more qualitative in nature. Okay, there are about 4 or 5 methods under this. The first one is the manager's opinion or executive opinion. Suppose if I'm the manager of a particular unit, so the higher ups in the organization would ask for me to develop my forecast for the coming next year. So I would use my understanding of the business and its potential and growth potential. Then I would factor those things in, and then I will forward that information to the higher ups. Okay, so that is the manager's opinion. Jury of executive opinion would be here more than one manager, typically at a much higher level, like general manager for production, the marketing and sales and all. So this is at a little higher level. These are the people who are involved with marketing, producing and marketing and selling that product. They are involved. So it's more than one person whose collective judgment is sought for forecasting that particular product or services. The sales force composite is the ground level effort. So here the salespeople who are in touch with the market are the ones who can feel the pulse of the market. So they can predict for future with a great deal of accuracy, because they'll be talking to the consumers, the customers. They know where they are heading. The one pitfall with the sales force is whatever prediction that they would give for the coming year, you would hold them responsible on that metric. Suppose if they don't perform according to that metric, then you will say that their performance is below average, and naturally their compensation gets affected with that. Okay, so we got to take that with a salt of grain all the time. Okay, the next one is a consumer market survey. Now this is nothing but going down to the actual consumer itself. Through the market survey, you do elicit some information about the preferences of consumers for new product or new services. Okay, and the pitfall of this market survey would be the response rate. So the response rate should be a decent rate, at least 30% or above, and it should represent all constituencies that the services or the product is intended for. Okay, so then only we can reach something that comes out of this survey with a degree of confidence. The Delphi methods is a method that is used fairly widely, and this is nothing but an assembly of experts in the fields, and they need not have to be within the same industry. They could be across industries and across the world. Okay, so they could be in different locations or different times. So what you do is you assemble this team. Like for example, presently, when the economic times are bad, now what does the president-elect or the president does? So he brings in the experts from different areas and then gets their collective judgment and makes a decision based on that. In the Delphi method, you bring in such experts. So what you do is you develop a set of questions and give these questions to the experts. Okay, and these experts will come back to you, and you look at their selection of their answers to the survey questions that you sent. Now based on that, see if you can make a conclusion. If not, using that as the input, you develop a second set of questionnaire and you administer those questionnaires again to the same experts, and the process continues. Within 2 or 3 iterations, it should come to a conclusion. If it not, then you disband that group and start fresh again. So that is the qualitative side of it. On the quantitative side, that is where a lot of it rests today, is the statistical techniques. Again, under statistical techniques, you can break it down into 2 groups. One is a time series, the other one is a causal model. Okay, what is a time series? All organizations keep historical record. What were their sales for the last 4 years for each one of those quarters? So this sort of information is available and always at the disposal of the manager from their data sources. So what you do is, against the time for the last 4 years, you plot the sales. You plot the sales, and then you just look at it if the behavior in the sales can be explained by the time. Like over here, we have an increase in sales, then a drop, increase and drop, and that pattern basically continues. Okay, in other words, over this period of time, 3-4 years, we see a gradual increase in the overall sales. So that's a trend that is present. Okay, and so the time, if the time is not an indicator, cannot explain the sales behavior, then we look at the regression or the causal models. Okay, in the causal models, suppose if when we plot, we cannot draw any inference between the sales behavior or the item of interest against the time, then we look for causal models. What affects this behavior? Like for example, sales of, let's say, the amount of beef consumed is a function of the price. The larger the price, the less is the consumption. Smaller the price, greater is the consumption. So in other words, the price can explain the behavior of the sales. That's a causal model. There is a cause and effect relationship. That's a causal model. First, you do this one with the time. If it is not, then you look for the causal relationship between the independent variable, the item of the interest, which is a dependent variable. There could be more than one independent variable that may affect this. Then in that case, it becomes multivariate regression model. Okay. Now, under the time series, there are various techniques that one can use, and there are several that we will use in this lecture here. First one is the last value method. Okay, and I will explain to you as I go through those what this last value methods are, and then I will explain how gradually we build on last value method to the averaging method. The other one is moving average method. Then exponential smoothing, that's a simple exponential smoothing. There is another one called exponential smoothing, adjusted for trend. There is another one called exponential smoothing, which is adaptive exponential smoothing. and adapt exponential smoothing with trend. There are more than one variety there. What we'll do is we'll keep them to the simple. And of course, anytime that you plot the data, okay, like sales against the time, we can see a gradual trend that could be increasing or that could be decreasing. Okay, and that's a trend component. The seasonal component is, suppose if I were to take this behavior and up to here, this is 1 year, and let's say this is the second year and this is the third year, meaning that about the midpoint of the year always the sales increase like that, and then they dip down towards the end. So from the beginning to the mid increases, from the mid to the end decreases. So that is a seasonal, meaning that so we see the seasonal effect across the year at about the same time. Those are the seasonal component. The cyclical component, like for example, recession typically runs like in a cyclical fashion. Okay, it could be every 10 years or maybe sometimes 10 years, sometimes 15 years, or sometimes within 5 years. So these are the cyclical. We do know that the economy goes on cycles. Okay, any data, the actual data that we have, that cannot be explained with these three components. Whatever the rest is random, because out there in the nature we cannot exactly predict the nature. We can get a good handle on it, but not the total understanding. So that difference between a good handle and the total understanding, which always eludes us, that's the random component. That's the random component.